our series of supporting Black and Brown children in the era of race, racism, and racial violence. I'm your host, Kamyala Howard from We're Divine Consulting. This lovely four-part series was brought in collaboration of children and incarcerated caregivers. And I want to give a special thanks to children and incarcerated caregivers. They have been such a support of not only helping me with this four-part episode, but in supporting children and families that have been impacted by incarceration, and especially in finding activities where our kids were distance learning, collaborating with the YMCAs. So if you guys are more interested in resources for children that are impacted by incarceration, please see CICMM.org, cic.mn.org. So like I said, welcome to our four-part series. I am so excited for this guest panel today. All of these people actually hold a special place in my heart, not just because I know them personally, but because what they've committed to do as a career. They are either police officers on the front line, former police officers, community liaisons, social workers, supervisors, but most importantly, they are brown body individuals that play a dual role on a regular basis, and they're all parents. Before I introduce or have my panel introduce themselves, I just want to give a highlight of the four series topics. And you can find each of our episodes on both of our Facebook page. Mine is We're Divine, WEREDIVINE. Go on our Facebook and all four episodes will be posted. And then on Children of Incarcerated Caregivers Facebook page, and also on both of our websites. But our first session that we did on supporting Black and Brown children was really about the parents. And as parents and Black and brown body caregivers, how do we process our own emotional wounds? What are our responses and our own experiences with race and racism? How do we even normalize conversations about race? If we have not been aware of our own racial adversities and trauma, how can we prepare to have these conversations with children? So I had three guests that week talk about their own experiences as a child growing up and then being parents, and really how to be able to process some of our own emotional responses, especially in the current racial climates. Our second episode was with two lovely individuals that also were parents, and it was about preparing to have this hard conversation with kids. Even if your kids are the age of preschool, the age of school age, they are aware of differences. They are aware of things that are happening in the world. They are aware of protests. They are aware of the death of George Floyd. And oftentimes we talk around children and we don't process things with children. And our number one teacher and our sense of safety should be our parents. So in that episode, we had a very detailed panel being able to talk about how do we have these hard conversations with children. Even as young as preschool, our kids notice the differences. And unfortunately, being a Black and brown body kid, we don't get the privilege to opt out of race. We have to experience that. It's not something that we can read. So it's our job as caregivers, as adults, as professionals, to be able to have the tools, the supports, and the language needed to help kids process these difficult conversations. Our conversation last week was about building self-identity, especially in brown, Black, and multi-ethnic kids. So many times as a Black and brown individual, we talk about our deficits, what's happening wrong in our communities, and we forget the positiveness of living in our brown skin. It's so important for our children especially to understand the uniqueness of their brownness, the special qualities, to embed seeds of good self-esteem, increasing their self-identity, because when they go out in the world, we cannot control how the world responds to them. So again, our role as caregivers is to build their self-identity and self-esteem. And then today, for our last episode in this series, because Life Talks will be back with other topics, but today we have a panel of individuals that are on the front line. Every day they're working with the community on behalf of the community, caring for children and families. They also happen to be caregivers themselves. So I'm very excited for the next hour to welcome our panel. Again, this is Life Talks with your host, Kamyala Howard from We're Divine Consulting in partnership of children incarcerated caregivers. So I would love for my panel guests to start to just do an introduction. Tell me what your name is, who you are, what do you want to share about yourself? favorite food. Just playing about the food. We can go there all day long. But who would like to start with an introduction?
I'll start. My name's Wendy Ross, and I work currently as a manager in Ramsey County Children and Family Services. I've been a social worker for more years than I care to share, and I am happy to be a part of this panel tonight.
Thank you, Wendy, for being a part of this panel. Who would like to go next?
I can go next. I am Kiana Bateau, and I also work in child protection in one of the largest counties in Minnesota, Hennepin. And I have had the opportunity to be a social worker in different communities in Minneapolis for about 18 years now.
Thank you, Kiana. Next.
My name is Deputy Guidry. I work for Harris County Sheriff's Office. I've been there for 8 years. I am a mother and a wife.
Love it. And last but not least,
the best for last, huh?
say the best for last.
I like that. Ladies first. I'm Stephen Williams. I am a 23-year law enforcement veteran, retired. For the past 6 years, I've been president of a small nonprofit organization that works with inner city youth in elementary schools mostly. But I do deal with community seniors and other organizations and individuals in the communities of disenfranchised communities mainly.
I just want to shout out the collective years of service and support that all of you guys have had with the community from 20 to 8 to 18. So again, I'm honored to have each and every one of you on here, and I'm honored to have each and every one of you as a part of my life, as a part of my village. That was another reason of me really starting We're Divine. Is it was my gift that I felt like I could give back post George Floyd. Being born and raised, I share with y'all, some of y'all in my listening audience, from Minneapolis, Minnesota, but actually on the block where Brother Floyd was murdered. I grew up going to that corner store every single day, and everybody's front line looks different. I wasn't a protester. I wasn't a person that engaged in that, but I knew that I had a position to play in balancing racial justice and advocating for brown and black body individuals. And so starting these Lifetop episodes were one of these things. Because I think about, I'm blessed to have a village, but there are so many of our parents and kids that we work with that are isolated. We're in COVID right now. And so I'm hoping that these episodes and the gift that you guys are giving to listening audiences, that they too can feel like they're part of the village. Let's just start today where I gave you guys a few questions. But I wanted to start with this big question, and it's very big, but you can interpret it how you want. How did we get here? How did we get here in this current racial climate, and thinking about the impact of being a brown and black body individual being impacted in 2020 still by not just overt racism, but by covert racism, the murders of unarmed black and brown people continuously. And thinking about that big question, how do you guys feel like we got here? Who's responsible for unpacking the impact? And I think that's such an important question, because oftentimes as professionals, we should be responsible. We have the training, we have the skill sets. There is kind of a hierarchy between us in the community, but also we're brown and black professionals. And we too still hold our own trauma and our own racial experiences in the world and outside of the world. So as we're thinking about this big question of how do we get here in this current racial climate, and you guys can use that as any example as you want to, whether it's working with your kids, family, personally, but also think about, well, who's responsible then for unpacking the impact of the racial violence, the impact of the disfranchising of communities, the impact of the us versus them that we're in right now, the polarization that we're in between communities and professionals and communities and systems. How did we get here, and who's responsible for unpacking the impact? Vaughn, do you want to start us off?
So I think in reference to how did we get here, I really believe that it's been a buildup.
Okay.
A buildup of traumatic events and experiences over the years. And when I say traumatic events, I mean traumatic events as a whole, and experiences, and traumatic events and experiences as individuals.
Yeah.
Who's responsible? I honestly, I feel like if you're an adult, I feel like you're responsible for unpacking the trauma that you carry, because ultimately you're usually the only one who is aware of the trauma that you carry with you on a day-to-day basis. And you are, in the same way that you are wise enough to figure out how to get money in any way and how to make ends meet, you figure it out because that's what you need. I feel like we as a community or as adults are responsible enough to figure out ways to heal. I think part of the issue when it comes to adults healing is the simple fact that a lot of our healing options are looked down upon. So if we're talking about who's responsible for adults, I say it's adults. If we're talking about who's responsible for kids, I really believe that it takes yes, our frontline individuals to really try to give them a different way of thinking or a different viewpoint or a different experience that will assist them in seeing the world differently, aside from what their parents and what their life experiences have gave them this far. So that's my take on how have we got here and who is responsible.
Yeah. Before I let others chime in, I think my one thought is I agree. I think everybody that's involved, like you said, our adults, are responsible for unpacking the impact. And in my work that I do day to day, I work with abundance of organizations. And I think the hardest thing, at least for us, brown body individuals, is to talk about mental health. It's still a stigma. And now this term of racialized trauma, we've normalized it so much that we don't even realize that it's trauma. And then when we do, nobody wants to be traumatized. You know, it's always about the others. But the only person that can help you inside and out, I believe so, is you. And if you don't have that capacity, that's where I hope to build a village so that your village can tag you in to say, hey, sis, you're not yourself. You are being impacted. When you come into work every day, you seem unhappy. You're disconnected. Your mood has changed. You know, giving me somebody to kind of check and balance, those are important aspects of starting our journey.
You're 100% right. And what I've experienced from my own village or from, you know, our Black and brown villages is the simple fact that we idolize the dysfunction as though it's okay. So instead of, you know, someone saying like, hey, sis, like, you're not looking happy. Like you're angry, you're frustrated. Like, why are you treating people this way? And just acknowledging their pain and their hurt. A lot of times we just brush it off like either they're crazy or they're only worried about themselves. Okay. Or we push it off as, oh, they just being real. They just keeping it real. And I think by dismissing it and seeing them as crazy or selfish or just keeping it real, they're keeping it 100, they just being them, is what I hear in my own community. I think those are, they're disabling as well. And they're not helpful responses to serious issues that people are dealing with.
Yeah, beautifully said. Others, what are your guys' thoughts about how do we get here and who's responsible for unpacking the impact?
I would say I second what Shervanti was saying, that we as adults are responsible. We're responsible for teaching. We're responsible for calling it out. We're responsible for educating, whether it's our own children, our own communities, or other communities that have an impact on ours. And so I think that it takes that to be able to change or others to understand and want to face this and want to manage this.
And that naming is so important. I think that's why in episode 1, I focused so much on even just giving terms like racial trauma and racial battle fatigue. And these are terms I found in the last 2 years, but they're not in our diagnostic manual. As a licensed mental health professional, I can't diagnose anybody with racial trauma. I can diagnose them with PTSD, and the symptoms are just the same. But the power of at least us within our community starting to name it helps us validate it, and then we can start to frame it and start the road to healing. But the thing about it is all of us don't want to be healthy. Some of us are functioning in dysfunction, and we're okay with that. So I think that's the thing to ask is, do you want health? Do you want healing?
Yes. Some of us get addicted to being the victim because that's all we know.
Yeah. Others, Steve or Wendy, thoughts about what we're talking about?
I think Ms. Guidry, I mean, she hit it on the head. This has definitely been gradual, especially in our institutions. I know they just simply reflect what's in society. Mm-hmm. But one thing, when I always go out to the community and speak, whether I'm speaking to the kids or the seniors or anyone else out there, I'm telling them in terms of just public safety, health, it starts with you. Yes, they look to institutions to reach out, educate, give resources, and that's a whole nother problem, but it absolutely starts with each individual in every community. But I want to say to everybody on this panel, and I know we work for government institutions, one big thing of mine has been to even some of the officers that I work side by side with still in the community, is that we have to start making the institutions. We cannot continue to let the institutions us.
What do you mean by that, Steve? Because I'm gonna write that down. You know, quotes. So we have to start making the institutions and not letting the institutions make us.
Right, and I think Ms. Guidry might know where I'm coming from. We come from law enforcement. Law enforcement has a culture, you know, probably unlike any other. Mm-hmm. You know, I like to call it the bully culture. They want you to line up a certain way and do things a certain way. It's that us versus them that you brought up earlier. You know, back when I was on patrol, they put me in a nice community, white community, and, you know, I'm protect and serve. Now I'm gonna send you over here to the lower income community, people of color. It's time to hunt, right? As if they don't have businesses and homes to protect. So we have two different, you know, philosophies here of enforcing the law. So it's time for us to stand up to the institutions and say, no, it should be this way.
Yeah. This will be a question for later, but I want you just to hold this thought. Do you guys feel like you have the power to influence in your current position? I'm just going to let you hold that. Do you feel like you have the power to influence? So we're going to pause that. Wendy, thoughts, reflections?
Just real briefly. So I'm going to hold that because, yes, I do have currently some power, shared power to make influences, different influences in how we respond to the community. And then just to get back to the first question, how did we get here? And my response would be any brown or Black person who was born in the Western world has experienced the traumatic, this place we called America. We've all experienced trauma in our own different ways, no matter the community you've grown up in, the family, it doesn't matter. If you have Black and brown skin, you've been a part of that experience. How we unpack it really depends on each of us. We all have a responsibility in that. It starts at home. I've always felt that way. And then how we respond to our community as we serve the community, we are looked to be responsive and to try and help people unpack their trauma as we work through our own.
Absolutely. I feel like I want to jump to that question now. How do we have the power? But I'm gonna go on order. I'm gonna let it flow. It's gonna come up real soon. So as you guys are professionals and a lot of you are from the community. I remember when I was working with different nonprofit organizations, I grew up in that community. I lived up the street. I knew the community. It was very different from me, from a lot of my colleagues, especially my white colleagues that would go 30, 40 minutes away. The only time that they would interact with our clientele would be those 8 to 5 Monday through Friday hours. I would interacting with at church. I would interacting with on the grocery store, at the park. I was a safe person inside and outside of the community. And because of that role that I played, my relationship was a lot different. It had took me a journey to being my authentic whole self to realize the way that I am doing the work is the best way for the community. As a licensed social worker, I've shared this out loud. In order to get my clinical license, I had to think white. A lot of the practices that were on my test were not the ways I would necessarily do the work that was best for my community. So in saying that, how do you guys feel like you're perceived as an individual, as a representation of your profession. All of y'all have been very conflictual system representations in the historical history that you've inherited. I mean, policing started in slavery. It started with polarization. It started with us versus them. Social workers, especially in child protection, also started with us versus them. And even just the history of separating families. And that is something that you often may inherit or may not, because of the role that you play, because of the position that you play. So how are you guys perceived by the community, and how do you filter that? How do you filter being that brown body individual? How do you filter being a part of the community, but also inheriting this system? You guys each represent a system, and that system has history of mistrust, history of oftentimes violence and fear, even when you're thinking about child protection, I used to think of I don't want to be a child protection social worker. So the first thought I thought is, you're here to remove families, to break up families, to remove kids. And then once I got into the field, I'm like, wow, sometimes it actually is a benefit to the family. And we also do need police officers. As we see in cities where the police have not been present, that makes a bigger impact. So how do you guys filter that? How do you filter that dual role that you have to live in, that you have to play? And how does the community perceive each and every one of you? And you can answer that. Yeah.
I couldn't even wait till you finish.
I know you couldn't. You like.
So first, I want to just say to Mr. Williams, I really appreciate how you broke it down. In the white communities, you're to protect and serve, and in our communities, you're to hunt. And it really sparked something in me, because that's exactly how child protection works with families. Our voluntary services are always open and available for our white families and white communities. Our involuntary services, our Black and brown babies, the numbers are ridiculous. They're actually embarrassing to report. What I can say is that how the community views me, and what I guess you'd have to ask community members. What I can tell you is what they've told me, and that is they're so happy to start seeing people like me, people with a voice and who are not afraid to speak on behalf of families and bring families to the table as partners in decision making. They are elated to see that and thanking me for being present. That hasn't happened before. So, yeah. How they view me now, I know every time, like you said, child protection, y'all just here to take my children. No, that's not what we're about. But I feel like now, even pre or before Mr. Floyd's murder, I feel like we've been given an opportunity to now be ourselves at work and in the community. So when you see Wendy at the store or Wendy at the downtown building or at church or wherever you might see me, it's going to be the same person that was at that meeting with you last week talking to you about the removal of your children, or the return or reunification of your children to your family home. So I think I'd like to believe, and I do believe I'm a part of a system that's changing. It's slow, long overdue, but it is changing. And I do believe that's because we're starting to learn that in order to help a community heal or to work alongside of the community, they got to be at the table.
Yes.
That's just like with any relationship. If you want it to work, everybody has to be at the table making decisions, because we don't know what's best for families. Only they can tell us that.
Absolutely. And I think even being your authentic self is what makes you such a good social worker. Trying to be like the others is not effective for our families. And that's what builds the trust. That's what says, yep, you know what, you are child protection, but I trust Wendy, and Wendy is a representation of that. And so maybe there's another Wendy out here like that. And so when we're suppressing our authentic self, when we're suppressing our brown, our Blackness, our cultural being, we are hindering the relationship and the impact that we can have on families. And I just encourage young professionals, people that are listening to this episode, fight to be your authentic self, because that is what families need. And it's a fight. Everybody on this line know it is a fight to be your authentic self, so much that I couldn't be it in an organization. This is why I started We're Divine. But you guys are able to do it and continue to do that. And you're right. I think George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd has opened up an opportunity where people are kind of leaving us alone at least. They're not, not suppressing us as much. I don't know how long this is gonna last, but we're not a trend. I said that in another show. And so let's not make it a trend. This is our lives. We are impacting our Black and brown babies every day. And so it is a fight. It is a fight. Others, how are you perceived by the community? How do you play both roles?
I think I can just jump in behind Wendy. You have to be your authentic self. Yeah. Our communities recognize that. Our kids recognize that. And you're perceived differently when you are your authentic self. When they're able to speak to you outside of that child protection role, when they're able to speak to you at a grocery store or a school, even revealing, and I don't even know how to say the word, but like siding with how they feel or their experience that they're going through with their children being removed or how they're being treated by the government. And so I think that if we're our authentic selves, if we are there to support, if we're there to listen, that it builds a different trust. I hear from colleagues, weren't you scared to say something to that mom? Or were you scared to speak up about what they're not getting? And I'm like, no, we're the only ones who are here to do it. And if I don't do it, our families are going to continue to be treated how they're treated. And that's not why I'm here in my role. I'm here in my role to support families and to have kids at home and to get families to have the support that they need. So from day one of working in the community and from how I grew up, it has always been be your authentic self. Yeah. Be real, be honest.
Yeah.
It is politics.
What'd you say was the last thing you said?
Oh, I said with the politics and without.
With the politics and without the bureaucracy, of in it. It is well, just ironic, the word fear that you use and having other colleagues say, well, weren't you scared? Weren't you scared of that? And I think about, like, I've never feared my community. I've never feared a neighborhood. Even when I was home in Minnesota last week, everybody was like, ooh, don't go here, don't go there. And I said, I've never been afraid of people that look like me. And I think because we don't have that fear, it operates differently. And we know what happens when you respond out of fear. And so just even you using that, I don't have anything elaborate or intellectual to say about it, but I just wanted to sit on the word that you said, that some of your colleagues are saying, weren't you afraid to go here? Weren't you afraid to tell this person that? And my always response is, I never fear anybody that looks like me. I just don't. I don't have it in me. Steve, Vaughn?
Yeah,
you look like you got something to say.
Trying to give everybody a chance. But
so y'all gonna be a part of my regular show. This panel is hot, man.
I am raring to go.
We ready to go. Okay. Lifetime audiences, y'all be ready.
In law enforcement, back to that thing what you said about how do we feel. Myself and Ms. Guidry, we both have to deal with being not just police officers, but Black police officers. Okay, so we have a dual problem here, right? Number one, we're police officers, and number two, when Black communities and even brown communities as well kind of look at us like, first of all, how can you be a police officer? Knowing the way they oppress Black and brown people, right? So we have to deal with this dual issue. So we have to work extra hard to gain kind of their respect. So it is definite. We have to get a relationship with them. It's imperative. It is the only way we'll be able to reach any of them. Yeah. Which is why when I work in the communities, now that I have this good relationship, I'm able to bring Sergeant Williams and Ms. Guidry and some other officers that have worked with us as a crew down there. And they look and they go, okay, he with Mr. Williams, they must be cool. And of course I tell them that. And we can take it from there. So we have that. I'll never forget this young man. I was on a panel at a church. We were talking about, and this was before Brother Floyd got killed. It was another bad incident. I can't remember which. But this young man, he was 16. He got up and he asked this entire panel of Black police officers, how does it feel to work for an organization that oppresses your own people? And you could hear a pin drop, right? Nobody could really, of course, I had to take the question. I told that young man I couldn't answer that in 1 minute.
Yeah.
But what I will tell you, man, is that if you call the police right now and you need help, I would rather me show up than some of these guys I work alongside with. And so that's the one good thing I can give you in a 1 minute answer.
Yeah.
So me and him had a friendship afterwards, and I hear from him ever since. So
before you guys came on, I disclosed to Vaughn that even though I haven't had too many personal negative interactions with police officer, the witnessing it alone, the minimization, them seeing how they talk to our Black and brown babies in our community, I had an automatic mistrust. And until I got to meet Vaughn and the other Williams and you, I didn't trust police officers. And I told Vaughn, I said, you guys are really the reason why I've learned to see the person first and then the uniform, because that uniform for me was a trigger, even with my privileges, my education, my way of talking out, because you have meant me harm. And so I had to build that relationship and then start to talk to our parents about the stigmatisms that we use. I mean, police officers, even historically, has been used to weaponize, but parents do it too. I remember hearing parents say, if you're bad, I'm gonna have the police come, or I'm gonna have you be taken away. And so that is instilled in our kids early on to fear them, that y'all are here to either remove them from the home or you're gonna take them to jail. And so the weaponizing has been even continued in our own community. And so we have to be aware of that. And it's so funny that my cousin was visiting me, and I was talking to a group of police officers. This man is 48 years old. He pulled me to the side and he was like, Kimmy, what you doing? I said, talking to the cops. First of all, they was fine. They was Black and they was fine in uniforms. Let's just say that Life Talk audience. But I said, I'm just talking. He said, we don't do that. He said, we don't do that. I said, you're right, brother. In the past, I have been right where you are at, but I have learned to get to know the person first and not generalize everybody that puts this uniform on. And it's y'all's uniform. We don't do it with firefighters. We don't say, woo, that firefighter coming, don't talk to them. We don't say that paramedic is coming, don't talk to them. It's something that your uniform holds. It's a trigger. It's history, it's pain. It's how it's been utilized. And I just want to read one snippet, and I wasn't going to introduce this book, but I am. I picked it up, I got it off of, I ordered it because we ain't advertising nobody. Find it in the Black bookstore. But it's called How to Police the Black Community. And it's written by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Louis Farrakhan. And I'm not into religion or politics, but the quotes in this book is right on. And the intellectualizing of how to work with our community. So one excerpt he just says is, police officers need to understand that there's a growing perception and body of documentation that suggests their function to protect and serve has been altered without their knowledge. That your function to protect and serve has been altered without your knowledge. And what he meant by that is exactly what you guys were saying, Steve, is that there's a different role that you are supposed to play in the Black community. You are to protect and serve the white community, the white businesses, and the white stores. In the Black community, it's order and control. And so he goes on to say that you don't even know that you've inherited that role of protect and serve has been embedded in you, and a lot of you are not even conscious of that. And I thought about it like, wow, that makes a difference. That makes a difference. And so what do we do with all this? Because we've inherited it. And we start to build the relationships. We be our authentic self. We get into the community. Not when we're just called out, but I love when I see police officers playing basketball, eating popsicles. Hey, I know you, I know your mom, you know your mom. No, you're not supposed to be skipping school. Like, I actually know the community. I live in the community. How about that? I actually live in this community. I go to this store in the uniform, outside of the uniform. So I'm equally as invested, but I also have an equal risk, because I live in this community. So just food for thought. Vaughn, thoughts, reflections?
Yes, in reference to basically having a dual purpose, or basically a switch of purpose, I can even say, for what I've experienced, is that sometimes we are taught unconsciously to protect and serve us. Okay. Unconsciously. And so because
us being police officers?
Us being police officers, unconsciously, we are taught to make sure that we go home safe.
Yep.
And in the effort to make sure that we keep our lives, it's almost like, I mean, I'm just sharing. That's the honest truth. And it's an ugly truth, but it is what it is. That's what I've found to be true, is that we try to make sure that we go home. And I think that sometimes, because we are taught to believe that everyone is out to harm us, you know, our patrolmen on the front lines kind of lose track of the simple fact that the people that they're responding to, their lives are just as important.
Yeah. And I would love to read, and I've heard that before. I read it before. I think it was a police officer in Texas, when the individual that was having a mental health breakdown was shot and murdered, and they were interviewing a police officer, and that police officer literally said what you said, like, we are trained to make sure I go home at night. And my response to that is, you should be trained to make sure that everybody goes home.
Oh, yes, as a community, yes.
Yeah, we all go home.
Yes.
We can go home a little wounded, but I want to go home. I want to go home. And I even thought about, you know, and I don't want to make this a us versus them, but I was reading this book again, and I'm like, well, what happened to arresting people? I mean, you know, like, do we not do that anymore?
No,
How
they do.
making a crime become a death sentence. So, you know,
it goes back to fear. It goes back to basically our deputies being in fear. And quite frankly, I do believe that the media has a lot to do with that, in reference to how we as a community start to feel and basically start to become into an uproar, or stir those feelings and emotions up within us by what they choose to put on television regularly, those specific situations constantly. You have to know that the media is like causing our community to be in an uproar. Not saying that it's not necessary in some instance, because it is necessary for you to notice and realize those emotions and then deal with them. But a lot of times we don't have the capabilities to deal with them. In the same way that you said, you know, once there was a time where you basically felt a mistrust with law enforcement in the beginning, and then eventually by having a different experience is what made you gain that level of trust. And quite frankly, that's been my experience as well. And that's actually my passion, as well as Deputy Williams here. That's his passion, is giving our Black and Brown community a different experience of law enforcement, so they can have that trust in us. And quite frankly, we do play a dual role, because not only are we giving our Black and Brown community a different experience of law enforcement, sometimes we have to enlighten our own brothers that represent the blue line, and help them understand how to communicate to our community, or how to police our community, and how unconsciously there's times that they are actually agitating a situation and they're not even conscious of it.
Yeah. And we'll get to kind of what do we do with the community in our last couple questions, but I started to think about even the training and the credentials that you need to be a police officer. Now, I'm a licensed mental health clinician, and Kiana just got her master's, and Wendy's a social worker. I had to get a 4-year degree as a bachelor's. I actually got a 2-year infant mental health degree. I got a 2-year MSW. I had 4,000 hours for my first license, 2,000 hours for my second license, and 360 independent educational hours before I can be responsible for the emotional well-being. I'm only responsible for the emotional well-being of a person. I can never take their physical life. So thinking about that took me about 8 years. About 8 years. How long does it take to be a police officer?
6 months to a year. That is the honest truth, 6 months to a year. And now I'm not going to lie, although I am grateful that I have been able to reap the benefits of being in law enforcement. And yeah, I've been here for 8 years. But I do agree with you in the sense of training. I'm not going to lie, I definitely agree with Steve. There are times where I do see some of my coworkers and I'm like, how are you responsible for someone else's life when you don't value human life, or you don't truly care about people, or let alone yourself. And so I definitely agree with that, and I definitely understand, and I do agree with the need for better standards and more training. Now, also know that for one, it's already difficult to get people to apply to be police officers in general, and it's equivalent. It's a paramilitary for a reason anyway, because it's not wanted. Not many people want to do it, and even with the standards that we have, we still struggle to get people in. And so I definitely don't disagree with upping the standards. I think that would be a good solution or a good start. But you got to remember also that we're humans dealing with the most traumatic situations. And so at the end of the day, you have to remember that when you are putting a person in a traumatic situation or a life or death situation, people, sometimes they can revert back to training, and sometimes they are simply human.
But I think that is what, and this is not for you guys to hold, but I think that is why the importance of moving beyond training, because Wendy, myself, and Kiana, we deal with traumatic situations all day long, and they don't have anything to protect them. They go into homes, they have to remove kids, families are angry, families are on drugs. I'm dealing with mental illnesses. And the amount that it took for even the state to trust me to do this, and the amount of ongoing training, and outside of training, we had to do an internship. So I love the quote, Steve, that you said we have to start making say it again. We have to start making the institutions and not allowing the institutions to make us. Is that what you said? Not allowing the institutions to make us. And so, yes, it's not realistic for police officers to do the amount of training that we did, but it is realistic to have some better expectations than 6 months. Than to have just, you know what, Cammie, can you come do a 2-hour implicit biases training, and that's enough. Can we start to do some actual internships that if you've never lived in the cities, that all of a sudden you can't be policing the cities. Either you need to live in there a couple months, you need to live there permanently, or you need to do an internship to familiarize yourself with the community. And so how do we start to utilize our power, we're gonna move to that question, and leverage of how to adapt these systems that work best for the communities. When I literally thought about that a couple months ago, like, wow, the amount of training and reading and ongoing, and a lot of it was just on my own to be where I'm at. And then the expectations of education that we have for police officers, and they could have came 4 or 5 hours away from the city, and now they're responsible for people's lives. It's a big impact. It's a big impact. Any thoughts about that?
One thing I want to bring up with law enforcement training, the issue you brought up was legitimate. One thing they can do that I've been praying that they would do for years is to open their doors. Law enforcement is a closed institution.
Yeah.
I don't want to comment on the history, but it's been a closed door institution. They need to open their doors to education. Mm-hmm. We need to have college professors teaching us about the social sciences.
Yeah.
We can't let cops teach cops.
Yeah.
How's that going to work? Right? Yeah. We have all these issues with understanding culture and history and all these things that are important with these communities. A college professor should come in and teach us the social sciences.
People are actually doing the work every day. And that's not just in law enforcement. I'm gonna throw social work. In social work, I had one diversity class. I did this because I took the extra training myself. I'm literally was called the other day to, they're medical students. They're gonna be psychiatrists. Do you know they don't have any required diversity class as a psychiatrist? Not one required diversity class. So this is always a supplemental. Race is a supplemental, and it's across the board. And I want to shout out, I have been contacted by some police departments to do some training. It is my specialty, but that's just the beginning. And I'm very adamant that I'm coming in a couple hours. I'm not going to hold myself as responsible that I shift and change mindsets. This is a 2-hour session. It's a beginning, but you have to be committed to doing the work differently. And it cannot be a one and done. Good start, but it can't be a one and done. But we have to start getting this at all college institutions. I remember being at my university, my MSW program. I'm like, I got one diversity class, and we have people from hit towns way out. And now you're going to be working with kids as a social worker, and you've never seen a brown person. Your first brown person is in your internship. we got a lot of work to do across the board. Yeah. I got 2 questions, so we might go over just a little bit, because y'all just such a great panel. Y'all gonna be back. I'm sorry, y'all gonna be back. Live Talks audiences, they'll be back. I want to talk about what. Let's go into that power of influence. So you all do hold a position. Some of you hold actual title. Some of you just have more of your authentic personality, and that personality is not going to take a no. It's going to influence in general. But what do you feel? What do you feel like? Do you think, do you feel, do you have the power? What are your limitations? And again, I'm gonna read one more excerpt from this book, How to Police the Black Community. But in this book, they said that the Black policemen and women are positioned in a system at a level many tiers below the sphere of influence. You're positioned in a level many tiers below the sphere of influence, where the oppressive laws are made and where the enforcement policies are devised, leaving them few options to promote racial justice. So with that quote being said, where are you at? And where does your power to influence, and where do you want to be? Who would like to tackle that question?
I'll start. Where am I at? I think I'm, like I said earlier, in a position where I'm able to invite community in. That's something that I'm proud to say my agency has actually learned or recognized the power in having community at the table. Because I can think I'm influential, and I can think that my decisions are really making an impact on the families we serve, but the way that I find out is to ask the families I'm working with.
Yeah.
And I would say in the past few years, I've been able to do just that. Connecting with families. I got families calling me that I've worked with 8-10 years ago, because they know, number one, when they call, I'm gonna call back. Eventually, I'm gonna call back or email, however they reached out to me. And the other thing is, I'm gonna break it down for them. I don't have anything to sugarcoat. We're talking about lives. We're talking about children. And so I don't have anything to hide from you. If we've wrong, what I've also learned in this position is that, well, even before this position, when you've wronged somebody, especially a baby or a family in the community, you have to acknowledge it. I don't care if it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. When you hear somebody say, well, they need to move past that, my ass they do. You need to acknowledge that you were wrong, and you need to apologize and ask for forgiveness. And what do we need to do to make it right? And now I'm elated to say that I think I'm surrounded by people who actually understand that. When you talk about a village, that's important to me. My village is also important, but we have to recognize as social servants that our villages are just as equally important to us as the families and communities we serve. So when we're going out into these communities hunting, I love that term. I all these years, I ain't never been able to classify it that way. But I love the idea of thinking about, well, how would I want somebody to respond to my family? So the way I influence is I hold my staff and, you know, everybody who works with me, alongside of me, I hold them just as accountable. If you responded to a family in this way, would that be the same response you would have expected?
Yeah.
If you knocked on somebody's door, what would you expect? How would you expect somebody to address you? No matter the news that you had to deliver. When Kiana mentioned fear earlier, that really bugs the hell out of me. But I mean, it happens. I've had people ask me the same thing. Why would I be afraid of another person? I mean, seriously. And then I do have to say this, Cami. I don't know if I should, but I'm gonna say it.
Well, you know, it's life talk, so go on.
Okay. Well, you know, when you were saying that when social workers knock on people's doors, all they have is themselves.
Yeah.
Not all of us. And in the state of New York, social workers are licensed to carry. I just wanted to put that out there. And I'm not saying I'm promoting going out there shooting folks up. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying we have to be smarter.
We have to be smarter.
We have to work smarter, and we have to be prepared. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. And I mean, that's honesty. And by me saying I don't fear going into my community, it doesn't mean that I'm not apprehensive. It doesn't mean that I don't look around. I'm still in a vulnerable position as a woman by myself. I'm raised from the neighborhood, so I have some skill set that ain't got nothing to do that the school gave me. So, you know,
that's all I was saying.
It's using some of that common sense that we were trained to do on the life training skills that we got. But I believe that's what just makes us so effective.
Yes.
At what we do. Effective at what we do. I remember I used to do home therapy. And I would walk in and I would have no idea what I'm walking in. And Uncle Roof, it'd be 9 a.m. and Uncle Roof outside drinking his vodka and beer. And my call on child protection, no, the kids ain't there. But Uncle Roof gonna come in here and do this family therapy with me, drunk or not. And the next time Uncle Roof put that beer down, hey girl, that's the family therapist. You know, it's just, I'm not thinking about ethics. I'm not thinking about, ooh, he knows I'm a therapist. It's that I made a difference and now I'm part of this family. You know, and so for a different social worker going in, they might have already got on the phone and called somebody because they seen him pop a brown bag. He's been popping that brown bag for 20 years, you know, and so it's understanding that what our community needs is a lot different. But how do you, and I say this to myself every day, and that's a whole nother question, a whole nother series, is that how do I help people make sense of my experience? You know, how do I help you make even sense of this? We're talking about it. People are going to watch the show. But does that mean that they get it? You know, so it takes exposure for themselves. You can't just read about it. You know, some of the articles I read is that when racism increases, it says white people go reading. But reading is good, but it doesn't make change. So, you know, and everybody knows me as a consultant. I'm very, very transparent and candid, but this is why I'm effective. And so, you know, my power influence is also different, and the way I work with my clients is also different. So, yeah. Others, your power of influence.
I'm not gonna lie. In reference to my power of influence, I definitely give my thanks to Sergeant Donnie Williams. I'm not gonna lie, because he gives me the opportunity to truly have a positive influence. Because I can honestly say from my experience on patrol, because you are go, 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 it's hard to basically give a positive influence. I struggled to bring my authentic self to patrol every time consistently. Where I'm at now, it's easy to be my authentic self. And working under Sergeant Donnie Williams gives me an opportunity to bring my authentic self, and it's hard to not remain consistent, because for any of y'all who know him, he's pretty consistent. And so you just can't help but to feed off of that village of individuals. And Williams, he's one of our Fantastic Four. So we're usually going out. Yes, we're usually out in the community, and we will get Donnie out here eventually. But honestly, just sharing, for me, like we've already said, being your authentic self, and honestly, sharing your experiences, being open and honest with people about your own struggles that you too have, and being willing to utilize what you've been through to connect with that other individual. I think that's the most important. But regardless of if we have a influence in making a change in the racial social structure of this country, I really primarily don't focus on that. I primarily focus on making a difference in every situation and contact that I have. To me, that's the easiest way for me to make a difference and have an influence. And like Miss Wendy said, at the end of the day, you don't know, until the person comes back to you and say, hey, I really enjoyed y'all being here. Can y'all come back? That's when you know that you've really made a positive influence or a positive change. And we get that. We get that a lot. And so for me, I think that's why I do enjoy policing. But I can't say if I was still strictly doing only patrol, I probably would not be as positive about my experience. That's the honest truth.
I mean, our work is not always glorified. Like we know that. I mean, Wendy and I have worked together for years, and we would knock our heads sometimes over some of our clients. But you know, at the end of the day, those clients end up being my favorite clients. The ones that pushed me, and it was like, she comes to this office one more time. But you know what? I was that reliable person for her. And I'd rather have her take her bad day out on me than take her bad day out on her kid. And so I had to learn that by her expressing herself, that was her way, her outlet. She felt safe to say just what she needed to say, because she knew it would be no negative harm. And we would literally say that. Y'all can say whatever you want in our office, just when you're in the hallway or when you're in front of other kids, this is how I need you to show up. But me and Wendy will bring people back in the office. Go for it. Go for it.
Yes.
Because this is a safe space for you, because you might not have any other outlet, and we need that outlet.
And I think that as law enforcement officers, I think that enough of us don't understand that a lot of times it's just a buildup. Yeah. And so I'm with you. People come in my office and they're cussing and they're calling names, be this, be that. And, you know, I know some of my other coworkers would basically take offense to that. Like, hey, don't talk to me like this or what have you. But honestly, with me, I'm like, you don't know me. Like, I know you're not upset with me. Like, because if you knew me, you know that I'm amazing. But I know you're not upset with me. I know you're upset about your situation. Yeah. And so I'm not taking it personal that you're using that vernacular towards me, because I know that it's not about me. Like, so let me help you with the issue at hand. Yeah. And then let me help you with the root problem that led you here. That is what I enjoy doing. And so ultimately, I think that, yes, Steve Williams was spot on with saying we need university professors to come out and teach, instead of having people like officers who have become cynical speaking about those experiences, and unconsciously at times going through a therapy session in class unconsciously, you know. And it's like, I think our organization is working towards getting our officers the help that they need, unpacking the scenes that they have been on, so they then can return to the next scene as a refreshed individual and centered enough to be able to basically assist the community properly.
And the stigma with that, it's not a punishment, it's that I want you healthy. Every single person's system, but especially in law enforcement, should have self-care, self-compassion, support groups. For me, talking helps, but I need to get it out. Y'all, my friends know I like to punch. I like to box. I love boxing. I love physically. Repressing that energy and those emotions for me is the worst thing, because I'm an emotionally expressive person. So we should be doing the same thing with each and every one of you professionals, but especially police officers. I've talked about, like, well, what do you guys do with your secondary trauma and vicarious trauma? What do you do for self-care and self-compassion? What is your continual plan to unpack your experiences that you're getting every day? Or do you just pack it on, repress it, and all of a sudden it becomes boom? And so again, switching these systems, and it can't be taught by another police officer, because you didn't go to school for this. You haven't experienced this. You don't have the requirements, the background, the knowledge, the capacity, even the capacity to hold your own experiences and those of others. And that's where we have to start to move into being healthy professionals. Healthy professionals. Before I let Steve dive in, I'll add one thing. I love Lucy Laney School. Y'all gonna owe me a t-shirt. I shout them out every series, but they have built a boxing ring inside their school for, what's Lucy Laney? Is it middle school kids, Kiana?
It is elementary through sixth grade. Elementary through
sixth grade. And they have a boxing program. And it was done by this brother in the community. And he's used that to help kids regulate their social and emotional. These suspensions have went down. The behaviors have decreased because these kids need an outlet. And I know in Texas, there's something in Third Ward that's called gloves up, guns down. So being able to use different things. So if we're doing this with the community kids, shouldn't we be doing it with professionals? All of a sudden, as adults, can we take on everything that we see and not have an outlet? So again, our power to influence, but the influence has to start with us, right? Steve, Kiana, I don't know if you went. Go ahead, Steve. You don't say the side.
Okay. You haven't heard much from. Did you want to go, Ms. Kiana? No, you get okay. Self-care. I mean, I was
Yeah.
I'm sorry? Oh,
And
power of
the
influence.
power influence, the both of those, yeah.
Yes. And I've warned many officers, young officers, as well as many young professionals that I run into, especially that are working in the community. Please do not underestimate yourself. Don't get that I'm the low man on the totem pole syndrome. There's not much I can do. There's plenty you can do when you have access to people. I always let them know that. When I first got into community policing, last 7 years of my career, they put me out in the area, Fifth Ward in Houston, and it's pretty rough. And I walked in there and I'm like, okay, we can't have this. Too many kids skipping school. I started writing tickets, thinking, okay, that's a law enforcement thing to do. A few weeks went by, I never went to court. And I'm like, this is really weird. I've written all these tickets and I haven't gotten out one court subpoena. So I decided to just go up to the local court, see what was going on in juvenile court. And what I found was that they were encouraging these kids to quit school and get in a GED program and just basically drop out. And I'm like, okay, see, that's not fair. That's not right, right? So what I did was I had a meeting with the principal and I got a meeting with the community center manager, and they got together and they corrected the problem without using the courts. And that's the kind of power that you have to change people's lives. How many people can you say? I mean, now because of that, we got kids graduating from high school instead of dropping out. So you have a lot more power than you know.
Yeah.
You have that power of influence.
Yeah. And it's not our jobs necessarily to take on the systems, because we can get ourselves stressed out by that. I tell people, what can you impact and influence on a day-to-day basis? And that's enough. And that's enough. Because that is going to trickle on to the next generation and the generation after that. Like Wendy has said, there's parents that she ain't worked with in decades. There's hundreds of kids that each of you have touched. Kiana, you are the teacher. Like every high school person that went to high school in Minnesota knows Miss Kiana. And that is influencing bigger systems because we are impacting lives. So, I don't get caught up so much in politics. People were asking me today, well, what do you think about Kamala Harris? I say, you know what? I could have my 7-year-old guy kid on the ballot and I'm gonna vote for that person before I vote for the current administration. I'm not gonna allow myself to get stressed out or worry or allow the media, like you said, to influence. It's the same thing with the pandemic. 1 minute we got tissue, 1 minute we don't. I try to stay in a pretty cool, calm manner and not allowing the outside factors to tell me what's the urgency and what's not. And how that helps me is really saying, you know what, I did make a difference today. Even though I may not see it, I know I changed somebody's mind. I know I left an impression on them. These Life Talk episodes, I hope they go out wherever all over the world, or if it's just one person that says, wow, there's a social worker now that I trust because of this episode. There's a police officer now that I trust because of this episode. Then we've all made that difference and we've done enough. Miss Kiana, influence?
I would say I don't feel, or I don't want to take on the challenge of changing a system. I would say that I do it just
You're going out just a little bit. I don't know.
My day-to-day work, the family.
You hear me, Kiana? You're going out just a little bit. I think it's your internet.
And I challenge.
She can't hear. Kiana? You're out. You're frozen. I think she had this on chat. Well, we'll keep talking, and then if you can come back in, just chime back in. I want to add, like I said, for Kiana, even though her being in the current social work role right now, she has been a prominent admin in so many of the high schools, and they were alternative high schools. And so they were high schools in Minnesota that where kids were not successful. And it wasn't because the kids didn't have the capacity or the ability, it's because that the high schools were not willing to adapt to the kids. And how I met Kiana was from my sister, actually attending one of those high schools. And she dropped out and she made up 2 years worth of high school under Kiana. And so her power of influence, I know she's not gonna acknowledge everything that she does, but it goes so big and so deep. And when we're out in the community, there's not one young adult that says, wow, that's Miss Kiana, that's Miss Kiana, and really talking about the impact. I was just saying the impact that you have made in so many lives, and I don't think you acknowledge that enough. of the high schools that you work with and the kids that did not succeed in traditional high schools, and just the clout that you get. And I want to acknowledge that has been your influence. I've noticed and seen that. I don't think you even realize enough. There's not a place that we go and that people don't say, oh my goodness, that's Miss Kiana from this high school, that's that high school. And you've gone above and beyond your way before you were even a social worker working for the county. So I feel that.
I got kicked off. I've just joined in now. Yeah.
That's okay. I was talking about how I see you influencing. So go ahead, finish your statement.
Well, that's all I wanted to say, is that I just challenge those around me, and I just work with what I can work with and try not to so much worry about the system, but one by one, whether I'm in court, whether I'm talking to an attorney, I try to put my plug in that way, of a different way of viewing situations. And I just challenge that way.
So we're over a little bit, but I want to end with one last question. And this is a big question. I love this panel. I loved all the panel, but I was like, oh, we can talk. And this is a big loaded question, but how do we start to, and you started some of this, Wendy, but reestablish, repair these relationships that were damaged with the community, with our brown and Black children? What are some advice maybe we give to parents that are parenting young children that do fear police officers, that do fear social workers? What are some last minute words that you can give the Life Talk audiences about, or even other professionals, about establishing trust or reestablishing trust and starting to repair with our relationships, keeping our children in mind? And who would like to?
I'll be quick.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I'll just reiterate what I said. First, you have to acknowledge that you were wrong, accept it. Say, I'm sorry, or however it is you do, to apologize for any wrongdoing. And I have to do that now on a macro level, if you will. I may not have even known about the situation until recently, or may not have even been a part of the agency at the time, but I still acknowledge that I represent that entity now. And I apologize for the way that you were treated, or that the way your family was mistreated. Mm-hmm. And I'm here, and hopefully you can see me as an individual, and I'm here to listen to you and what you need. Mm-hmm. As far as parents, if you're out there listening, only thing I can encourage you to do is continue to be your authentic selves. And only the one thing that I've learned in my years of service and just being a Black lady in America is that fear, when you live your life in fear, it limits your growth and any possibility that's out there or opportunity that is waiting for you. Mm-hmm. And I hear this all the time, not only just from Cami, but others. You cannot live your life in fear. You have to recognize what it is that you're afraid of and address it. And that's up to you how you want to do that. You take information in from all those people in your village and people that you have surrounding you, and that you trust their advice and know that they're looking out for what's best for you and your family. But you have to address it in order to grow and move forward. Otherwise, you're teaching your children the same thing.
Absolutely. So lovely said. I do want to piggyback on what you said about apologizing and acknowledging who you represent, because it might not be you as an individual, but being very aware of who you represent, those systems. When I'm working with organizations, I talk to the white staff members about it might not be you as an individual, but your white status, that's a trigger for some brown and Black individuals and brown and Black communities. And you have to acknowledge that. And how far does an apology go? It goes so far. When I work with parents, I say, have you ever apologized to your child? I never heard my mom say sorry. You just all of a sudden it's all done. And so just how can we start to model that for our kids, even in our own families, apologizing when we are wrong as parents? How powerful that is. Thank you, Miss Wendy. Who would like to go next in our closing remarks about repairing relationships, reestablishing or establishing trust, or even words that you would give parents in this era of time from your experience?
I personally am, just as a quick overall, I would say to professionals, heal yourself and simply do your best to spread love and kindness. Like, that is what it's about, spreading love. Do your best to take your time with the individuals that you serve and really try to understand them. Not be right. In reference to parents with your children, when it comes to teaching your children about being an African American young man or young lady, I encourage you as parents to teach them more of the positive attributes. The negative is going to come. That is life, okay? And honestly, you can assist them through their negative as it comes, but really just push and empower them about what it means and how amazing they are as human beings, and Black and brown, African American, Hispanic American, it doesn't matter. Just empower your children and don't so much focus on the deficits that we have had as a community, but more so focus on all of the amazing things that we have done and all the amazing things that child, your child, can do. That's what I think we really need to focus on most, because when you focus on the positive, it's a good chance that you experience more positivity within your life. And if you focus on the negative, you will continue to have and see your current experiences as negative. So know that you have the power to create your life, and you have the power to move forward past those negative experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is all.
I love it. The increase in focus on cultural pride. That cultural pride is so important. Thank you, Vaughn. Steve or Kiana, last words for Life Talks listening audience.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of power in our culture, and that's two things I want to end with. And that one is, like Ms. Guidry said, I want us to stop with this deficit approach. We have got to start looking at the strengths that we have. And the one approach that I've always advocated for is for rallying around our youth. And I mean on the earliest level, which is why you see me in elementary schools so much. Our schools are failing so tough in these communities. And when you don't have a great start, you're probably not going to have a great finish. I've done this for many, many years now, and now I'm able to see some of these kids in college. And it's just an awesome thing to see. And like I say, we can do it. We have to lose this deficit approach, find that power in our culture, right? And get them off to a great start. We got to rally around these youth. Thanks.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Thank you, Steve. Kiana?
So I would say that I could speak to youth. I don't work with many parents, but my drive is youth and getting them to see the value in themselves. Having the power and encouragement behind them to speak up or ask questions about what they're experiencing. A lot of times they just keep quiet. And so I encourage them to ask questions about the position they're in, about what their schools are saying, about the position their family's in, their removals, because they have a voice at the table too, and they're the ones being affected by some of the work that we do. And so I just encourage them to speak up and ask questions and have pride in themselves.
Yeah, thank you. And just to all of my audiences, there's a couple words I always leave at the end of when I'm doing in-person trainings. And I always talk about that there's one of you, and that one of you is absolutely irreplaceable. And so in order to fill the cups of others, you have to fill your own cup up. And talking about self-care, going beyond self-care, but self-compassion and understanding our adversity and trauma that we bring into the workplace. So having a safe space to process that as professionals, having a safe space to process that as adult and caregivers, and that power of authenticity, that being and bringing your whole authentic self, and unapologetically being and bringing your whole authentic self is so important. And there's one thing that my sister Chanel has just given me, and I think I need to put it on a t-shirt. Oftentimes, in order for us to gain a sense of self, in order for us to survive the adversity, we have to unapologetically protect our peace. And so being aware of who's around you, who's part of your village, are they healthy? Are they healed? Are they on the journey to healing? What seeds do you put into you? And unapologetically protecting your peace could be a lot of things. Sometimes it's cutting off toxicity, and that could be relationships, family members, bosses, jobs, anything that takes the best away from you. I was excited about this panel. I was excited about just starting Life Talks. It's something that I actually probably am going to continue to do. I want to thank each and every one of you today for just taking your time to give your gifts, to give your talks. I say with us 5 on the line, we probably touch hundreds of lives. And I hope this episode gets viewed by millions. But if it doesn't, I hope it makes a difference in one person's life. And that from this conversation today, that you have some things that you can walk away with. And if anything you walk away with, remember that you have a village for that. You have a village for that. And you don't have to take it all on yourself. So there's a village for that. I thank you. This episode will be aired. Hopefully it went live, but if not, it will be re-aired again tonight. You can check all 4 episodes of Life Talk, supporting our Black and Brown children in the era of race and racism, on We're Divine's page and Children for Incarcerated's page and Facebook page. Thank you guys so much for tonight, and thank you, Life Talk episodes. It's been a great 4 weeks, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.